Reactions Matter by David W. Searcy, Jr. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share the video. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the content.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. Drum roll, please. Hi. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're having a beautiful day. It's nice and sunny here in Colorado. Got a lot of snow on the ground. Today we're checking out some unusual circus people in the world. I don't know, you go to the circus. When's the last time you went to the circus? It's been a while for me. Are you scared of clowns? The circus now is way different than the circus then, that's for sure. It's more as like a sideshow than it was a circus per se. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I want to thank you for joining us. Hit the like, share me a comment. I don't know. Let's get in. Most unusual circus people in the world.
Circuses are not only about performances by trained animals, stunt performers, and acrobats. They're also about performances by people who are very different from others. At least that's how it was about 100 years ago. This is Infinity, and today you'll see the most unusual circus performers in history. Let's go. For all the time of existence of the circus, a huge number of unusual people have performed on the stages of different cities and countries. Giants have been valued quite a lot in such shows in the past. According to rumors, this is one of them. One of the largest, heaviest, and tallest circus.
Is that a real person? I mean, he's freaking... I don't know. I can't call that
performers in history. It's hard to say if this is really the case, but it's possible that it's true. Firstly, in the past, huge giants often remained undocumented. And secondly, history knows other unusual circus performers whose existence is hard to believe. Among them were documented and absolutely genuine giants like Edouard Beaupré. This Canadian was born at the end of the 19th century and from a young age began to surprise everyone with his size. He grew literally by days and hours. Already at the age of 9, his height reached 6 feet, and when Edouard was 12, he exceeded the mark of 6.5 feet. Soon, Edouard reached a mark of 7 feet, dropped out of school, went to work on a ranch, but quit his job and started working in the circus. By then, the giant's height reached 8.2 feet. Thus, Edouard was as tall as the current world record holder, Sultan Kosin. He weighed a lot too, 375 pounds. Beaupré signed a contract with the Barnum & Bailey Circus, one of the most famous in history, and began touring, surprising audiences not only with his size but also with his abilities. It's said that he easily bent iron bars and lifted horses on his shoulders. In addition, the Canadian participated in wrestling matches against the strongest men of his time. As it usually happens in the case of giants, Beaupré's health was not the best, and at the age of 23, the circus performer was gone.
23.
There are complete opposites to such huge strongmen. Isaac Sprague, for example. Look at him.
Oh my
goodness. This circus performer looked like a skeleton. In fact, he even went by the name of Living Human Skeleton. What's interesting, Isaac was born quite ordinary and normal, but at 12, something happened, and he began to lose weight. At the same time, Isaac's appetite remained good, but the weight continued to decrease rapidly, and Sprague became a living skeleton. At the age of 44, this man with a height of 5.5 feet weighed only 44 pounds. This was not a healthy condition, and to cope with it, Isaac carried a flask of sweet milk everywhere he went, constantly feeding himself to not pass out. Medical professionals described his condition as extreme progressive muscular dystrophy. Initially, Isaac never considered a circus career, working elsewhere. But after the death of his parents, Sprague could no longer provide for himself and found himself unemployed. Fortunately for him, in 1865, he was sent an invitation to join the circus. A year later, Isaac was hired by the Barnum & Bailey Circus to work at their American Museum. People went there in droves to see the walking skeleton. Although Isaac was popular with the public, he disliked circus life and sought work elsewhere several times, but his health was deteriorating. His already poor condition was exacerbated by gambling addiction and the living skeleton's debts. It's not known when and how exactly Sprague died, but before his death, he bequeathed his body to science so that scientists could find out what was the reason for his thinness. However, it's also unknown whether or not his body was received by scientists. But this artist looks quite normal. There's no thinness or gigantism, on the contrary. But that's if you look at him only from the waist up. If you look below, it becomes clear what Johnny Eck was unusual for. This American circus performer was born with an underdeveloped lower body. He had legs, but they were very weak in the initial stages of development and small, so he had to hide them under his clothes. In general, the case of Johnny Eck is unique. Not only he performed in the circus, but also played musical instruments, photographed, raced, ran a business, and painted. He also lived for 79 years, despite his peculiarity. But still, he's remembered as a circus performer. Johnny quickly learned to walk on his hands, faster than ordinary children learn to walk on their feet. At the age of 12, Eck began his career as a performer, presenting himself as a man without the lower half of his body. The artist without the half of his body performed in a tuxedo, demonstrated a stand on one arm, climbed ladders, participated in setting up magic tricks. In general, he always had something to surprise the audience. When such circuses ceased to be very popular, Johnny and his brother Robert, who performed with him, returned to normal life and managed to achieve a lot.
Wow, cool.
I'm sure you've probably seen this man at least once. Schlitzie is probably the most famous circus performer of all time. It's all about his appearance. The boy was born with microcephaly. It made his brain small and his head too big. In addition, Schlitzie suffered from myopia and severe mental retardation, and his height was only 4 feet. It's believed that the artist's intelligence remained at the level of a 3-year-old child. Schlitzie was unable to take care of himself, and in conversation he could only use simple words and a couple of phrases. At the same time, he performed the required actions, clearly understood what was said to him, and was an excellent imitator. This led to the fact that he became very popular in the circus. His parents sold him to the circus, by the way. Sounds crazy, but in the early 20th century, this practice was common. The guardians of the guy were his employers, which Schlitzie changed a lot in his life. In circus and other performances, Schlitzie was introduced as the last of the Aztecs, the monkey girl, or simply, what is it? Schlitzie often performed in women's clothing to make his image even more vivid and memorable. All of this together made him very popular. He was a circus performer in the 1920s and 1930s. Even when Schlitzie left the big stage, he continued to perform on the streets in small shows and performances. No matter how you look at it, in the late 19th and early 20th century, people were more attracted to art.
Isn't that crazy? Like, seriously. Back then, people paid money to go see people with deformities, and now you get in trouble if you... How sensitive have we become? You know what I mean? Like, granted, these people, but that guy, obviously, he was born, but he was 3 for his whole life.
Artists with unusual appearance, rather than to those who were notable for their abilities and skills, which is why Schlitzie became so popular. The same story happened with Ella Harper. The girl was born with a pathology called knee hyperextension. In simple words, it's when the knees are turned backwards. People with this condition have to walk only on all 4s. At the end of the 19th century, all roads to the circus were open to people with this peculiarity, and Ella went to perform there. She was nicknamed the Camel Girl. There's no insult here, it was not considered offensive even at that time. In advertisements and announcements of performances, Ella was described as a beautiful and attractive young lady who had body parts and gait resembling a camel, and it aroused the public's interest. It bore fruit. By today's standards, Ella earned about $5,000 a week.
Wow.
It's very good money, isn't it?
Yeah,
but at some point,
doubt.
the unusual artist was bored with everything, and even a good fee could not keep her on the stage of circuses. She left the show business and decided to get on with her life.
Where would you go?
By the way, Ella Harper is not the only famous circus performer with such peculiarity. There was Robert Huddleston. Only if Ella was called the Camel Girl, he was called the Pony Boy. Unlike Ella, he had not only his knee joints twisted, but also his elbows, which gave him a very unusual appearance. At first, Robert worked on a farm where he became very physically fit, and then moved to the circus, which included other people with all sorts of physical anomalies. At performances, Robert demonstrated marvels of flexibility and stamina. In his performances, Huddleston tried to always be original and funny. He didn't want to be perceived simply as a strange man. The artist invented new tricks, showed complex performances with other artists, and constantly joked with the audience. In short, he combined circus performances and stand-up on one stage. He himself treated his peculiarity absolutely well and never worried about it. Probably this is also why the audience loved him so much. He worked in the circus for almost 40 years and generally lived a long life, despite the anomaly of body development.
They had us come see the human freaks. Look at this main sideshow, human freaks. 5,000 reward if you can't. I don't know what that says. Ripley's Believe It or Not. Have you ever been to the Ripley's Believe It or Not museum? Oh man, it's amazing. It's amazing the stuff that has happened on this planet. People that have been produced. Craziness. Craziness.
This man is the first in this episode who outwardly is not distinguished by anything special at all. It looks like an ordinary person, but in fact, it's a unique person. This circus performer has been dubbed the Human Owl, and you can see why. Martin could actually turn his head 180 degrees to the rear, and he felt no pain at all. Martin's crazy performances are shocking even now. Imagine how shocked audiences were in the first half of the 20th century. In addition, Martin could not just turn his head and look at his back. In this position, he could drink and smoke, but not for too long. With his neck twisted, it became difficult for him to breathe. Just don't try to do it. It's a really death-defying act. The trick's incredible, but only one performance in the circus performer's arsenal is somehow not enough. So in addition to the ability to turn his head, Martin surprised people with other performances. He was known for teaching various animals to perform acrobatic tricks. One of his famous performances was the one where two cats were made to wear gloves and box each other. He also performed with a dog that he taught to walk only on its hind legs while carrying an umbrella. Once again, we have a man with an unusual appearance. I would say very unusual because he has two heads. The two-headed Mexican was the name of this man, whose real name was Pascal Piñon. The story goes that he was found in Mexico, either in a Native American tribe or in a mine.
Two-headed Mexican.
When the story of Pascal reached the United States, one of the circus workers decided to get him. The locals didn't want to let the two-headed man go, considering him a devil and saying that together with him, the evil would come out. But the circus still got the unique person. It all sounds interesting and even creepy. But in fact, it was said about Pascal to advertise his performances. Actually, he was not two-headed at all. The second head on top is just a large tumor. For the performances, it was specially made up. Pascal went out to people and shocked them with his appearance.
Snap.
They were all convinced that there was a second head sticking out of the Mexican's forehead. But apparently, over time, the audience began to guess that they were being deceived. Besides, by then Pascal had already brought the circus a lot of money, so after several years of touring, he stopped performing, and the director of the circus paid for his surgery to remove the tumor.
Wow. You still go to your job if Amazon sends you a paycheck every 2 weeks? Because there's a little loophole on Amazon right now.
What? That dude had two heads. They painted a whole head, a whole face on top. They were sick,
Today, you've already seen the camel girl, the pony boy, and the human owl. How about to replenish this piggy bank? In front of you is Grady Stiles, the lobster boy from the USA. Look at his hands and arms. They really look like crustacean claws, and his feet look very unusual. In general, the nickname suits him well. This appearance is a consequence of electrodactyl, a genetic mutation in which the three middle fingers are missing and the thumb and the pinky form the letter V. It was passed on to him from his father. Grady's son also became a carrier of electrodactyl. Grady's father performed in circuses with eccentric performances all his life, and of course made his son get into the business. Despite the fact that Stiles was popular and earned good money from performances in circuses, and not only, Because of his peculiarity, he was forced to live in social isolation and was considered a social outcast, which caused his emotional and psychological problems. At some point, this led to him committing a serious crime. Despite the fact that the court convicted him and he himself pleaded guilty, he was not jailed but given a suspended sentence. All because no prison in the United States was ready to hold a prisoner with such an unusual feature. This was a unique case in the history of the judicial system of the United States.
Yeah, huh?
Among circus performers, you can find not only people with unusual appearance or abilities. Among them, there are even world and historical record holders. For example, Lucia Zarate. She lived in the late 19th century. Lucia was an American sideshow artist of Mexican descent. Do you realize what a world record she set yet? If you're thinking size, you're absolutely right. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, this is the adult with the lightest weight in all documented history. At the age of 17, Lucia weighed only 4.6 pounds. Moreover, the girl's height was only 20 inches. Her shin was only 3.9 inches in circumference. And Lucia herself became the first patient with congenital dwarfism type 2 known to doctors. Scientists believe that Lucia's physical development stopped at the 1-year mark. Surprisingly, it had no effect on her mental abilities. Lucia Zarate spoke fluent English and Spanish, performed at fairs, and was popular in the circus. She was so famous that she was even known in other countries. That's saying a lot. But the story could not have been all that good. As is often the case with such people, Lucia's life was short. She died at the age of 26. This man also made history as more than just a curious performer. He's considered the first documented person with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Even if this is the first time you've heard of this syndrome, you already know what it is. Yes, it's all about skin that stretches like rubber. In addition, people suffering from this syndrome can suffer from abnormal mobility in the joints, which bend in any direction. But Felix Worley is remembered for his performances with his skin. He could stretch it in absolutely different ways. It stretched to unimaginable size. Of course he was popular in the circus. There, he was called the Elastic Skin Man. By the way, in our time, there's a famous artist with the same feature, Harry Turner. The Briton amazes with his ability. His skin stretches to almost 6 inches in length, so he can easily stretch his neck skin over his face, stretch his cheeks to an inconceivable degree, and so on. You can see for yourself. However, he often suffers from painful sensations in his joints, so he pays for such a superpower with his health. It's hard to believe that what Harry Turner is doing is real, that there's no editing, special effects, or the like. Likewise, many will find it hard to believe that this woman was real. Seems like her legs were just enlarged with the help of Photoshop, but that's not the case. This is Fannie Mills, and she's one of the most famous circus performers with Milroy's disease. At first, she was okay. The girl was born normal, but soon the disease began to progress. Lymph was accumulating and stagnating in Fanny's legs, and it was impossible to remove it. As a result, her legs grew to incredible size. Shoes for Fanny were made to order. 3 goat skins were required for 1 pair of shoes. No one could cure such a disease in the 19th century, so Fanny had to just accept it and go to perform to somehow monetize her peculiarity. Being a circus actress, Fanny accumulated a good capital and decided to set for her personal life with its help, but it was unsuccessful. This girl died before reaching the age of 40. Amazing people exist not only in the circus. History knows many incredible cases of people transforming themselves by losing hundreds of kilograms. Stay tuned. John Minnock. Looking at pictures and old videos of this man, many think he's just a random man who's overweight. He probably weighs 600, 800, or even 1,000 pounds, right? Wrong. In fact, you see the heaviest man in history, and he weighed much more. Of course, there may have been heavier men in history, but John Brower Minnock is officially confirmed. This American, who lived in the last century, weighed 1,400 pounds at his peak. Just imagine how much that is. Is it hard to imagine? Well, that's about the weight of 2.5 Harley-Davidson motorcycles, or 5 truck tires, or the weight of 8 to 10 average people. Minnock had weight problems since childhood. Even then, he suffered from a serious form of obesity. He weighed 291 pounds when he was 12 and 392 pounds when he was 22, and he was 6 feet tall. When he turned 37, things got so bad that Minnock had to be rushed to the medical center. This required the efforts of a dozen firefighters and rescuers, a specially modified stretcher, and even a ferry to transport him. John was put on a very strict diet of 1,200 calories a day, which he kept for 16 months. Like all dieters, the record holder had his relapses. Sometimes he ate again and would gain about 200 pounds in just a week. This, by the way, is the record for the fastest weight gain. In over a year, Minnock lost almost 926 pounds, and that too was a record. The record for weight loss among men. However, it didn't make much of a difference. His health problems were getting worse, and John passed away at the age of 41. At that time, he weighed 798 pounds, and at the moment of his death, his BMI was 105.3. For comparison, the normal index ranges from 18 to 25.
But it's taken me a little bit, but I'm starting to get there now. Now I'm feeling like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. Now I understand how to level up.
To lose 926 pounds is incredible, but that's not the limit. Amazingly, one person managed to lose more than half a ton of weight. It's hard to believe, but it's a fact. I'm talking about a resident of Saudi Arabia named Khalid bin Mohsen Shari. Because of health problems in his youth, he began to gain weight rapidly. Khalid was literally growing before people's eyes. About 10 years ago, at his peak, he weighed about 1,345 pounds. Needless to say, Khalid couldn't move and even had trouble breathing. Things got so bad that he had to be hospitalized. An operation was performed. Workers removed part of the wall of Khalid's house, used a crane to lift him out of the house, and flew him to a hospital by cargo plane. At the hospital, Khalid was examined and found to have a record-high BMI of 204, almost double that of the heaviest man of all time at the time of his death. At the hospital, Khalid underwent surgery. Doctors removed 176 pounds from his abdomen, and then a long period of recovery, treatment, and dieting began. Incredibly, after only 4 years, the guy weighed 150 pounds and was unrecognizable. To lose 1,195 pounds in 4 years is an incredible achievement. This woman could also boast of such achievement. Like the previous people in the episode, Rosalie Bradford was heavy from childhood. Already at the age of 14, she weighed about 220 pounds, and at the age of 15, she weighed 330 pounds. She married, they had a child, and Rosalie began to cook and eat constantly. Her weight continued to increase uncontrollably, as did her appetite. Rosalie tried to keep a diet several times, but to no avail. Things worsened when she was admitted to the hospital. Bad rest contributed to her weight gain, and Rosalie became immobile. At her peak, she weighed about 1,190 pounds. Rosalie tried to commit suicide, but luckily she was unsuccessful. Soon, she was contacted by Richard Simmons, a well-known nutritionist. He developed a diet plan and exercise program for her. At first, the whole training consisted of clapping her hands. The woman's body was physically incapable of more. But gradually, Rosalie lost weight. The exercises became more difficult, and after a year, the woman lost almost 419 pounds. Then she went even further and, with the help of a physiotherapist, lost another 507 pounds. The total weight loss was 917 pounds, which was a world record amongst women. Perhaps these people's stories will motivate some of you to get in shape for the summer, or simply to create the body of your dreams. As you can see, nothing's impossible. Well, I suggest we change the subject a little bit and look at other people who have one thing in common: unusual weight. Keep watching to see the skinniest people on the planet, the woman who aims to set a dangerous and strange world record, and people who weigh less than 15 pounds. Lizzie Velasquez. Lizzie Velasquez is one of the most unusual people on the planet. First of all, this woman is a carrier of a very rare disease, Weidmann-Rautenstrauch syndrome. According to scientists, only 1 or 2 people in the world have this syndrome. Secondly, many people recognize Lizzie as the thinnest girl in the world. At a height of 4.9 feet, her weight has never exceeded 64 pounds, and now Lizzie weighs about 55 pounds. Needless to say, at that weight, she has literally no body fat. But that's not all. Surprisingly, Lizzie eats a lot more than many of you do. What's more, she eats way more than some bodybuilders who are trying to gain impressive muscle mass. The girl consumes between 5,000 and 8,000 calories a day without gaining any weight at all. Sounds like a dream to many. There's nothing cool about it. Lizzie does it simply not to die. She has such a fast metabolism that she has to eat literally every 15 to 20 minutes. The number of meals a day is about 60. All this is compounded by a very weak immune system, blindness in one eye, aging skin, and other ills. But the record holder is not discouraged. She's learned to live with her feature, has a positive outlook on life, is a blogger, motivator, and writer, and is involved in medical research. With Lizzie's help, scientists can take some areas of science to a whole new level. Tom Stanford. The next person of the episode looks like Lizzie. Not in terms of appearance, of course. The fact is that his body has also no fat. Tom Stanford is the skinniest man on the planet. Again, many people would dream of no body fat, cool definition, lean muscle, and so on. But Tom hardly has any interesting definition. He doesn't even have much muscle. The guy looks like a living skeleton, and it's not because he's been overdoing his cutting phase and fat burning, or has anorexia. Tom has an extremely rare genetic mutation. One of his genes is mutated so that fat simply doesn't stay under his skin, no matter how much he eats. Amazingly, blood tests on such a skinny guy show that he's obese. All in all, Tom's case is truly unique. Scientists say that only a few people in the world have this feature, but Tom's was much more pronounced than that of others. Among other things, the guy doesn't hear well. He has low testosterone level. He often experiences pain in his legs, and his bones are fragile. Tom has repeatedly suffered fractures and other injuries. What's surprising is that Tom is a professional athlete. He's a cyclist. And despite his feature, he's successful. He competes in Paralympic cycling and has even been the champion in some races. His dream is to compete in the Paralympic Games. Even though he's 33, he may try to qualify for the Games. Jeremy Gillitzer. The next person of the episode is different from Tom Stanford or Lizzie Velasquez. Looking at old photos of Jeremy Gillitzer, one doesn't understand why he's even in this video. He's a very good shape, no problems with obesity or thinness. However, at one time, Jeremy was one of the skinniest people in the world. At first, things were going great for him. He was a successful educator and worked in the modeling business. What could go wrong? Jeremy was too demanding of himself. He always felt that he was overweight and that he didn't have the perfect shape. Childhood traumas also played a role in this. As a child, Jeremy was often insulted by his stepfather. As a result, the guy began to lose weight and lose his shape. At first, it was gradual, and then abruptly. Accumulated resentment against his stepfather, a bad relationship, his mother's illness, and 2 consecutive traffic accidents led to the fact that in 2004, the model developed an eating disorder. One thing led to another, and Jeremy became an anorexic. Unlike Lizzie Velasquez, he had no dangerous congenital syndromes, but at his peak, or rather bottom, he weighed almost like her, 66 pounds, at a height of 5.8 feet. Jeremy became the thinnest man on the planet, but not for long. The body couldn't withstand such stress, and at the age of 38, the model died. Some deliberately lose weight, turning themselves into a skeleton, while others deliberately put on weight. Bobby Jo Wesley once had an ordinary figure, but after she became pregnant, she had health problems and began to put on weight rapidly. Instead of undergoing treatment or keeping a diet, Bobby Jo decided to make gaining weight her goal. And no, she's not planning to become the heaviest woman on the planet. She has a slightly different goal. Bobby Jo wants to become the woman with the widest hips in the world. She wants to break the record of Michele Ruffinelli. So far, this woman has the widest and biggest hips of the planet. They're about 8.2 feet in circumference. Bobby Jo is 4 inches from the record. To break the record, the woman eats only the most unhealthy and fatty foods possible. For example, she adds a bunch of mayonnaise, bacon, ham, and breadcrumbs to healthy salads or fresh vegetables. And also she eats pork, sausages, cakes, and so on in huge quantities. Wesley walks on thin ice. She already has serious health problems. The woman's joints are severely strained and damaged, and she may lose the ability to walk in the future. But Wesley says she'll try to break the record, even if that lifestyle kills her. Do you think it's worth torturing your body to go down in the Guinness Book of World Records history? Share your thoughts in the comments. And now let's take a look at some insane Guinness World Records caught on camera.
Let's do this.
Florida resident Ramiro Alanis set a new record for the number of times he's seen the movie. Alanis spent a total of 720 hours or 30 days watching the last Spider-Man movie. The funny thing is that this is nothing new for the man. He's held a similar record before. In 2019, he went to watch Avengers Endgame 191 times.
Assemble.
But outrageous fortune screwed the guy up because some other moviegoer beat him to it after a while. Apparently, Ramiro Alanis was pissed that he wasn't the only one who went to the movie theaters 200 times to see the same movie. So he started 30-day challenge of continuous watching of Spider-Man. By the way, if he went to the movie about 300 times, that means the guy spent a total of about $3,500 on movie tickets. And without straying too far from the subject of tickets, I'll tell you an important point. This incredible record has its own rules. The intrepid viewer must watch the movie from start to finish, including the credits, without being distracted by things like a smartphone or interrupting for a bathroom break. All of this is verified by surveillance cameras. Also, as proof, the person must show the judges all their tickets. By the way, it wasn't a major Spider-Man fan who stopped watching the movie. The movie was simply withdrawn from distribution. As the guy claims, he's now able to literally quote the entire movie from beginning to end. I think he's even dreaming about this movie now. And in his dream, everything is exactly the same as in the movie theater. His brain must have memorized every fragment perfectly.
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not with physical.
Let's do this.
The Bahamas is synonymous with luxury beach vacations. Wide white sand beaches, clear waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and great coral reefs. But not many people know that one of the biggest diving tournaments also takes place there. The essence of the tournament is to dive to the maximum depth by holding your breath without any auxiliary tools and gear. At the competition, which was held in 2021, 4 new records were set in the first days. But it's the record of Alexei Molchanov that interests us. The athlete was able to dive using a cable to a depth of 413 feet. The total time he spent on the dive was 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Such an achievement was immediately listed in the Guinness Book of Records. Just imagine how physically and mentally fit it is. A man wraps his arm around a rope going somewhere in the abyss, which in a few seconds will become the only thing leading him back to the natural environment. Slowly breathing in and out, the free diver prepares to hold his breath for more than the 4 minutes he needs to dive. By the way, there hasn't been a single major freediving competition in history without an emergency situation. Every time someone faints when surfacing. To make sure that nothing of the kind happens, even underwater, each athlete must be accompanied by equipped freedivers. In the same year, by the way, Alexei set another record. This time it was a record for diving under the ice. The Russian freediver crushed the mark of 262 feet. It happened in Lake Baikal in Russia. The diving process lasted almost 3 minutes, while the athlete was only in a monofin without scuba gear. But not only people can surprise us with their strange and, in a sense, crazy actions, cats can do something too. Don't believe it? You think that these sly creatures can only steal milk from the fridge and walk around the apartment? All right, I'll prove you wrong. A resident of Austria taught her cat tricks. The whiskered performer not only memorized many of the moves, but also managed to perform them in record time, thus entering the Guinness Book of Records. The 8-year-old cat named Alexis did 26 stunts and tricks in just 1 minute, and it wasn't spontaneous at all. The owner had been training her beloved pet for more than 5 years. If any of you also want to teach your beloved cat or dog some tricks, then you need a pretty popular but effective tip. The owner would feed the cat every time she did one of the tricks. Surprisingly, according to the rules of the Guinness World Records, you can't feed or praise the animal during the performance. For this, the owner was most worried. Nevertheless, the cat didn't let her friend down, and after a successful performance, she was rewarded. By the way, the owner decided not to stop there. She made plans to perform 30 tricks in a minute. We're waiting for new achievements.
Let's do this.
A guy named Chris Nickick became the first person in the world with Down syndrome to successfully complete all the trials of a triathlon, despite a break in training due to injuries. Moreover, he was even the first person with this syndrome in general to make such an attempt. The Ironman triathlon is the toughest test of strength. Not every healthy and physically fit person can go the whole distance. However, the distance is not easy and varied at all. First, athletes have to swim about 2.5 miles in the open water. Then they get on bikes on which they should ride a little over 112 miles. And then they run a marathon for the last bit, 26 miles of running. And it'd be okay if the time was unlimited, but people are given only 17 hours to do this. Chris woke up every day with one thought and one goal in mind: to become 1% better. And so it was every day of his training. The guy was sure that he would definitely pass this test of strength and will, and as we can say with confidence today, Chris got what he'd been working hard for a long time. Well, isn't that a great motivation for each of us? Some people spend a lot of time preparing for incredibly difficult challenges, while others have absolutely no interest in testing their stamina and spirit. They see the meaning in pulling and lifting the biggest weight possible. And no, I'm not talking about another powerlifter who bench pressed 220, 440, or even 660 pounds. That, at any rate, would not be as unique as this man's story. He was able to deadlift an almost 286.6-pound disc setup with just one finger. Of course, not everyone would go for such a record. Well, our guest is not a simple gym lover at all. This is martial artist Steve Keeler. In the record he set, Steve held the load for 8 seconds. The idea to set such a record came to the man quite spontaneously. As Steve himself says, several years ago he tried to lift a barbell with one finger and noticed that he had very strong bones. That was the spark that created the fire of desire to become a new record holder. Steve set a goal, pursued it, and eventually got his name in the Guinness Book of World Records. A German named Sebastian Stüttner has set a new surfing record. The guy conquered a wave that was more than 85 feet high. Stüttner rode the giant wave with a speed of more than 50 miles per hour in October 2020 in front of the residents of the Portuguese town of Nazar, where all this was happening. No human had ever done anything like that before. After a short period of time, the record was confirmed and right there, in Portugal, the surfer was awarded a Guinness certificate. Curiously enough, the previous record was set right there. So if any one of you is burning with the desire to add your name to the Book of Records, or just wants to watch the huge waves from the side, you know where to go.
Jordan, come over here, come over here. This is freaking crazy. You see this house right here?
Yeah, I see it.
Someone is making 50.
Let's do this.
Ice skating. I'm sure that many of you are not interested in this sport, and believe me, you lose a lot. It's an exciting and at the same time spectacular sport which can always shake to the core. Precisely that, by the way, happened quite recently during one of the preseason tournaments in the United States. People have long since gotten used to the fact that tournaments like this don't play a big role. Athletes come to these tournaments in not great shape and kind of test themselves to prepare for something more important. That's clearly not the case for a guy who was born in the United States. Ilya Malinin has personally written a new page in the history of ice skating in such an uninspiring, crowd-pleasing, and quiet atmosphere. Malinin was the first in history to land the quadruple axel cleanly. Before Malinin, many people had practiced and tried this jump, but no one had ever done it in competition before. The difficulty of the quadruple axel lies in its special technique, which is very difficult to take into account. This is the only one of the jumps performed by a forward move. This is the only classic landing called the backward outside, so the body completes an incomplete number of rotations in the air. The quadruple axel is 4.5 turns in the air, while on the ice it feels like 5 turns. This feature of the axel has always made it a tricky and difficult element. At the same time, it's surprising that the jump was conquered by the guy incredibly quickly. He came in less than a month from timid attempts to a clean flying jump and became the first athlete in history who managed to perform the clean quadruple axel at competitions. Of course, he won that competition by a large margin. Nuclear reactor. Everything to do with it, the chemical and physical rules, Nuclear reactor. Everything to do with it, the chemical and physical rules and stuff are incomprehensible things for most people. Some, even as adults, when they devote many years to it, are still unable to understand relatively simple and basic things. However, there's a kid named Jackson Oswald who has personally built a working nuclear reactor in his home. Can you imagine that? The 12-year-old guy found out about the record of another wonderkind who had built a reactor at the age of 14. Jackson thought to himself, am I any worse than him? So he started repeating the record. The diligence and enthusiasm of his compatriot's record allowed the boy to break the previous record and become the youngest person to build a nuclear reactor. According to the teenager, all the work went smoothly with only himself involved. He did it all without anyone else's help. According to Jackson, all the work took about 2 years. During that time, he encountered many problems, but fortunately for him and everyone around him, he found a solution. The hardest part, if it makes any difference to anyone, was the construction of the airtight seal. That task took as long as 6 months. But no matter how hard it all went, the kid kept doing it, and his parents encouraged him to do so. The young man's mother stated that she was excited about her son's project. "I Googled everything before he went into different stages," she said, and in fact, her worries are more than understandable. Who wouldn't be worried if their son was doing nuclear experiments at home at a young age? That's how it is. Someone at a young age hardly assembles an IKEA cabinet, and someone at the age of 12 builds a nuclear reactor. Goodbye, self-esteem. That's all, guys. What record could you equal? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you later.
That's funny right there. Some people can't. Some people can't. Well, I mean, I can. I've done it, just did it recently, but there are some adults who cannot put together furniture, and a 12-year-old kid builds a nuclear reactor. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Until then, peace.